Welcome to the Art of Hitting channel. Today we're behind the scenes in the dugout with Ed and Dan. We have Steve Hogan, the CEO at Florida Citrus Sports, Orlando, Florida. Join us as we dive into Steve Hogan's incredible journey, his vision for Orlando, and the impact he's made on and off the field. Welcome to the dugout. Let's see them thumbs. Yeah, get them thumbs up, Steve. Oh, yeah, there you go. Yes, sir. I got a great one here today. Steve Hogan. Yes, sir. Today we have the privilege of hosting a true powerhouse in the world of sports and community development. Since 2006, Steve Hogan has been the CEO at Florida Citrus Sports, where he has transformed the organization into a driving force for Orlando's economic growth and social impact. Under Steve's leadership, Florida Citrus Sports has produced marquee events like Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, Pop-Tart Bowl, and Florida Blue Florida Classic. Not only bringing national attention to Orlando, but also generating significant benefits and supporting at-risk children and educational initiatives. But Steve's influence doesn't stop there. As the 2024 chair of the Orlando Economic Partnership, he has been recognized as Orlando's Business Journal CEO of the Year and one of Orlando's magazine's 50 most powerful leaders. His leadership extends nationally and locally, from serving as the national chair for bowl seasons to being a founding member of Lift Orlando, where his commitment has helped shape the future of Westlake's neighborhoods with over $120 million in capital development. Join us as we dive into Steve Hogan's incredible journey, his vision for Orlando, and the impact he has made on and off the field. You won't want to miss this episode. Now, I just personally want to thank you for being here. I know you're a busy man, busy schedule. You're very prestige guest on our part. We usually have just run-of-the-muck athletes, ex-athletes that were professional ball players. But it's certainly a long way from me getting barred from bowl games by you, but we'll get into that later. Let's learn a little bit about Steve's family. Dano?
Yes, sir. I'd like to thank you as well. This is going to be a good one. I'm looking forward to it. Tell us a little bit about your wife and kids for a game.
Yeah, my wife Angie, she's a rock. You know, my stepson, our oldest, Davis Brownlee, they're from Savannah. Kind of originally when we met, they moved down. Davis kind of lived with me from 7th grade on. He's a great kid. He's an assistant pro at Country Club Orlando right now. Wow. Golf pro. Was a good golf player in high school, and I don't like to play with him anymore now. He cleans me up pretty good out there. So just for pride reasons, I just avoid the golf course. But we got 2 young kids. My son Anderson is 11. He's playing a little bit of baseball right now. He's been playing since he's about 5 or 6. Just started middle school football at First Academy, so they got him working a little bit at running back and play a little bit of linebacker. So it's the first time getting hit, I think, this week. So we'll find out how long he's going to be playing football, but they're in pads, so we're good for that. And my sweet little daughter Blakely is 9, and she's a competitive cheer flyer. So you gotta. My wife takes care of all that, but you find yourself running all over the country for 2 minutes of action and a couple $1,000s worth of stage. But
I've been there, seen that, and done that.
Anything for the kids, but it's a busy house, right? And at this stage of life, to have grade school kids and middle school kids, it's an experience.
Well, that's cool. So, were you born and raised in Florida?
I was born in Chicago. My dad. We lived outside, north side of Chicago, out by O'Hare Airport in Elk Grove Village and Arlington Heights, and kind of grew up there through grade school. Moved down to Florida when I was in 5th grade, and spent the rest of my days Sebring, Florida, Lakeland, Florida, and then ultimately went to the University of Central Florida and kind of set up shop there in 1995, of course. So. Florida raised, but Chicago. My dad passed away a few years ago, but Chicago always for the Cubs was my stop. My young son and I have already caught 2-3 series up there to see the Cubs play, and so kind of caught between. My grandma always lived in South Florida, so a big Dolphin fan. I was born in the late 60s. I shouldn't say that, date myself, but in the early 70s, Dolphins were pretty good.
Yeah, they were.
A couple of undefeated seasons, and So I fell in love with the Dolphins, love the Cubs, and so I called both Chicago and Florida really kind of my homes.
You're a participant in as a fan. Did you play sports growing up?
Well, I played. I wasn't very good, but I played. I enjoyed. I tried everything really. In school, my sister was a really good drummer. They got me kind of into the band and the marching band for a lot of years. I wrestled in high school, played a little bit of baseball, of course, growing up. Was on the football team there. Ultimately, I tried out in my junior year coming back. I sat out my freshman and sophomore. My junior year, I had some opportunities to come and be a preferred walk-on, and I chose UCF for that. And
Walked on at UCF?
Walk on at UCF.
Who was the coach there?
Gene McDowell, yeah. So Gene McDowell, Mike Kruzik, of course, Coach Gooch, who leads the Cure Bowl now, was a running backs coach then, and ultimately became head coach for one game. But it was a good group. We had great players then. I watched them all play. I got to go to practice, sit there with my helmet and do nothing. But I watched them all play. And Sean Jefferson, Sean Beck, then I ran into him at the kickoff luncheon the other day. He's one of my favorite guys. We were all kind of in the same class together, but Becton was a great receiver. He got a little bit of a look with the Bears in preseason and hurt his knee, and that was it for him. Sean Jefferson went on to play in the Super Bowl with the Patriots. Heck of a successful career receiver, and we had a lot of guys on that team. Bobby Spitolski, Rick Hamilton, a lot of NFL players, believe it or not. It was a Division I. Kind of was our first year Division I football season. It was on probation, but we had went in the playoffs next year. And UCF's had some teams, but I was blessed to be a part of that for one season.
On that note, like as far as UCF goes, like what was the genesis of kind of getting into that school specifically?
I wish I could say. I tell people this all the time. I had no plan. You should have a plan. You should be a little better than me. I just, my dad was a preacher. He was a Episcopal priest, my stepfather, who I lived with from 6th grade on, and we had a lot of money, of course. So you're working full time. So when I graduated high school, we started throwing watermelons in Sebring just because that was one of the industries in the area. Picking
Throwing watermelons means selling them or
picking them, putting them in the truck. About 950 melons a truck. Jubilees, the big ones. You get paid
$250,000 by their name.
You get paid $9 a watermelon, $9 a truck. Each press 4 men on a crew. You got about $9 a truck. You're filling as many of those trucks as you could a day.
How big a truck is that?
What's that?
How big a truck is it?
Well, it was a loader, so I don't know the size. Just think of
like a lot of watermelons.
There was a lot. Almost 1,000 melons in that thing. It was a pretty big truck. So you're working, you're rolling down those roads. I didn't last very long doing it, of course.
You break a lot?
You broke a few, but you had to pay for them. It came out of your check at the end
really?
of that. You didn't get a check, got cash, but out of your cash at the end of the day. So you didn't break too many. You were pretty darn careful, but it was an experience, right? I mean, we're out there in the fields every day, and so it taught me that I guess I better get serious about something.
Where are you going?
So we went on to junior college and at Polk State College. Started studying, and I worked full time. I worked all through. I was working in high school, worked in junior college, never stopped working. So I think part of that, when I got to junior college, I said, I still think I could play some ball. I could kick it at least, and so I went up there and tried out, made the team, and so it was just more at that time. It was just more about where do I go? I'm a junior transfer. We knew some people at Florida. They said you could come up here and be a preferred walk-on, or met somebody in Tennessee. They said I could come be a preferred walk-on. I just went to UCF thinking that was closest by. Yeah. Made the team and never played. Just sat there and watched a lot of practice.
You were a dummy in practice.
I was a dummy in general, but Coach said you're going to play left out. Left out of the game.
Yeah, I remember you being a fairly good athlete. How big a boy were you?
Well, I grew late. In high school, probably my senior year, I started to hit 6'1", 6'2", ultimately 6'2", about 200 pounds.
That's pretty good.
210 right now, still today. But at that time, that was a decent sized kid, and but I was able to kind of play a diversity of sports, right? Baseball, it all just kind of came natural. But I wasn't exceptional at any one of them, right? So it was, but I enjoyed it. I think it built my. I love being a part of a team.
You had to do too many watermelons.
Right. I was happy to move on from my watermelon career.
You and Scott, you got to talk to Scott about how he moved on from his career when, I got him a job in construction in high school, digging a hole. Here's a whole story. I won't go into it, but you got to talk to Scott because it's kind of funny. It's similar to what you said. And for the audience out there, Scott, my son, my youngest son, and Steve are fraternity brothers and great friends. Just FYI.
Yeah, well, I know that Ed wants to dig into your time at UCF with Scott and how that kind of set the table for what kind of comes next. So go ahead, Ed.
Well, what I want to do first is kind of set the stage where I'm coming from. I believe, and I've always told my grandkids, and I don't think I did that with my sons. I think by Scott's time, I was more modernized, if you will. I was just an old redneck, and almost, I went to military school because I had to, kind of thing. So you get to it. But my point to him was build your relationships in college, build your network relationships, and that's where it all, as a successful person, and I hope you'll support this as we move through this, is that the relationships are some of the key points in your development and helping in your future, and we'll dive into how that may help you and may not. So let's do this first. Why don't we just talk about some of your memorable experiences in college?
Wow. Yeah, I got so many, but if you live up to college, like anybody, right? I mean, you're kind of on your own for the first time. You got to be responsible for kind of helping pay bills and, feed yourself and all that kind of stuff. And so, to me, I just remember all of that, what it was like to kind of be a little bit more responsible, right? And, you learn that pretty quickly. You got to go to class, and that was never my favorite subject, of course, was going to learn anything. So, by semester 2, I realized you better start spending time studying or you're going to find your way, kicked out of this place, just, probationary wise. So I was never a great student, but I probably finished with B average through the rest of my time at UCF just because you kind of had to buckle down. And I just remember, those things became realities pretty quick that, this is the real world. Even though you're in college, you better start using this opportunity to set up whatever kind of comes next. I wish I'd have figured out a lot of that stuff earlier. I'm big on relationships, of course. Everything that's happened to me in my career has been because of relationships, still is today, not because of really any other leading factor. And, I tell kids this all the time. I've spoken at graduation and other places. And
let me stop you right there for a minute, because I heard you give the commencement address at Sarah's, and I knew you fairly well, but I forgot most of the stuff I knew about you. Okay, but I was extremely impressed by that graduation commencement address. It was very good, and it's one that I remember some of it.
It was fun.
Yeah, you were good, buddy.
It was a day. You think about. Again, we're talking about being in school. I never dreamed possibly that I would speak at commencement at UCF graduation. There were probably 8,000 people in the building that day. It's intimidating. And I speak all the time in my job, constantly, but it's on your core subject matter, right? Stadiums and sports. And, I could give a 20, 30-minute talk without even writing anything down and just get up there. It just comes natural. When you stand in front of a graduating class of young kids and their parents, in this place, and you're trying to say, what the heck am I going to talk about in here? And so, it was an unbelievable. I'm walking in there and with all the professors, and we got all the garb on, and just reality set in. And I meant it. I'm on the stage. I turned to the president. I said, I got to believe when he actually realized that I was up next to be one of the commencement speakers. What happened? How did we allow this guy with his academic career? What is he doing up here imparting any wisdom at all? In fact, Steve, I want you just to stop saying you went to UCF, much less speak at commencement.
That's from my standpoint, I've heard many, seen many, and seen some of the great speakers of our day and motivational speakers. Dude, you were good. Ain't no doubt about it. And you're good now, yeah. That's why you're on the dugout. We don't just invite everybody on the dugout, do we, Dan?
No, sir.
Lo and behold, your granddaughter was in. I didn't even know your granddaughter would be in the graduating class. What strange things in life. I held her as young kids. We would play with her. You barely could walk, and here I am speaking at her graduation. It's a crazy life.
So just getting back a little bit on the relationships, let's talk about the fraternity, because I believe that I didn't go. I got married. I had a scholarship offers, but I got married and just did my thing. So I didn't have that experience, and I wasn't big on fraternities because I didn't know anything about them. And Scott said, "Well, I'm going to join a fraternity." I said, "Oh, here we go." But tell us about the life as
the fraternity life.
Fraternity,
Look,
right.
I loved it. I think it was different for me, and I think different for Scott. Scott went off and was a college athlete and a quarterback up in Missouri, and transferred into UCF kind of like I did. And so we got to UCF at a different stage of our life. I think it's different when you join fraternities and probably sororities when you're 18, fresh out of high school. You're wide-eyed and you do all that at the same time. I think it means a different thing when you're older. We were older, and at least for me. Believe it or not, Sean Jefferson, the wide receiver at UCF, I was talking about, he and I were pledge brothers in Sigma Chi that same year. And I did it, football was over for me, and I did it because I just knew some buddies. One of them was from Lakeland. He was a Lake Gibson football player. He was on UCF briefly too. And he's like, "Hey, Steve, you ought to come take a look at this." So sure enough, right? He's like, we play intramurals, and I'm like, that sounds like pretty good asset, for me to get together and be competitive still and do things with some guys that are kind of like-minded. So I joined as a junior, and I think it's dramatically different, right? And Scott was the same. It wasn't so much about the social. I needed friends, or I needed to do it to be, kind of have a social life. I was fine there. I did it because there were some people that I thought we could play ball for a few years while we were finishing our education, and that's what it became. We played everything. I mean, the fraternity offered basketball. We had fast pitch, softball, in the end, playing football.
Were you part of Scott's softball league when he created his own softball league?
Well, I played with him after Scott and I met I'd already graduated. This is kind of how we built.
You weren't there with him.
I was the quarterback of the football team for Sigma Chi for the 2 seasons right before he got there. Then he was the next 2 years, and we didn't cross over. We didn't know each other that period. And I think we only lost 2 games, and they were both the final game in the playoffs. To go to New Orleans in the national tournament. And so I tease him all the time, right? Because I was recognized as the Sigma Chi Athlete of the Year twice, right? So for whoever in the fraternity.
And he didn't get it.
He didn't get it. Well, I don't think he got it one time. But he reminds me all the time, they never lost a football game, and they did go to New Orleans. And so, we had a little bit of fun with that. But we got to know each other. We met each other because of that. I think some guys that kind of crossed over in my kind of business life said, "Hey, you ought to meet Scott. He came in as the quarterback after you, and we got to lunch one day, and we're all hanging out as guys, and so we just hit it off immediately. And of course, we're getting after it. In fact, he played with some of the same guys that I played with at Sigma Chi football that were still freshmen and sophomores when I was a senior, and so we just had a lot of fun with that. But then our life, and we played competitively in sport and social. We played in some tournaments together. We played in the Sunday leagues out at Winter Park, and these were competitive tournament style players that would go all over the country, and so he and I would we were both really good. I think if you had to put us both to the wall privately and put us on a lie detector, I think we could say either choice is good if you needed a starting quarterback in that league.
Yeah, he would say, but that's why he said Scott was better than that mobile, because he was a lot more mobile. There's a little, but what disappoints me now about this is I thought. See, I'm an old guy. I don't remember. I thought that he may have went to New Orleans. I took the guys to New Orleans in a van. There's a lot of stories there, and I thought you might have been one of them, but he wasn't.
Well, so, Scott wouldn't have played. That wouldn't have been fair. Well, if I were still there, you wouldn't have been driving probably. It was for you. At least you got to enjoy a trip with your son.
That's why he's where he is today. Yeah, he can really spin it.
He's smooth, man.
Yeah, so you guys became fast buddies, and the things you've done in Orlando is just tremendous. But what happened in college that led you to where you're going? To the the sports entertainment business? I mean, was that do we call that sports entertainment business?
Yeah, they do, and it is. It's both. But there was really no plan in college for me for this. I just wanted to graduate. I wanted to achieve a degree. Again, I say this a lot. I didn't have a plan. I should have had a plan. I should have been doing internships and volunteering and doing these things in the career path I wanted to get into so that I could build my resume. And I never did that. I went off, and like a lot of kids, I'm like, I guess I got to get a job now. I'm done. And so usually it's a sales job of some sort. And I got into the cellular phone business. I'm selling cell phones over in Tampa area. So I was in the Lakeland office by business account.
So you're selling cell phones?
Selling cell phones. That was my first job. Big company called McCaw Communications ultimately got bought by AT&T. And, so that was, I hated it, of course, but you got to pay the bills. So I'm out there selling these things. And these weren't the cool phones of today. These are, the bag phone. You pull the Velcro off and a big old thing in your car, or, they had the big phone, looked like you're calling it a bombing run in the military, a big white thing.
Doubles down as a Billy stick.
Yeah, it could do some damage. So, I sold, and then I moved into the advertising business. And what happened was, and again, this is where relationships kind of start coming into it, is my parents had a relationship with a lady named Carol Monroe in Orlando, and she had worked at Florida Citrus Sports. She was at Citrus Sports. She was one of the top 2 or 3 people working for Chuck Rowe. But they had a social relationship with her family. And so she'd heard, hey, look, I hate what I'm doing. And this is probably 4 or 5 years after college. And she said, we have this opening in events up here. Steve ought to come interview for that. So I did. And, the kind of rest is history. So that was 1995. And I was at the newspaper in Lakeland at that point doing advertising, the Ledger. And I took that job and left. I was working.
You were writing. So you must have been pretty.
Well, I wasn't writing. I was selling advertising for the newspaper. And the guy, the guy I worked for, his name was Nelson Kirkland, and he was a former UC. I think he was offensive lineman way back in the day, back in the early '80s. And a good guy, but he was so active at UCF. He'd be at every home game, and he was passionate. So here we both were in Lakeland, and so I was still connected. He had this flag football team in Lakeland and traveled. I was their quarterback forever, but we went on up.
How long did you play flag football?
Every year.
When you start, you're 50. What?
I probably stopped at.
No, you're 54.
54, 55, and I stopped probably around right when my son was born. So what? 43-ish, 44, 40, somewhere around then. I'd still play today if they'd let me, but I just don't have time, right? I just loved it, and I could still do it. Didn't have to run all that much.
You look like you're in good shape.
You could just throw it. Scott and I had a pretty good deal. You're not running a whole lot, not running a whole lot away from somebody, so you can do that until you're 80. So maybe he and I will get back out there here before too long and get one half in.
I don't know, man. That flag football, if you should go play softball before you play flag football, less chance of getting popped. But we have guys. I have guys on my 75 team that are out there throwing footballs and warming up before the softball game. Come on, guys. I mean, But flag football. I had to give it up because of bad knee. You get bad. Yeah. You don't have bad knees or anything, huh?
No, I've been pretty lucky. My back, my lower left back, and my right shoulder. I can only make the shoulder's probably the worst part, just because I could get through about probably a game. It would take me 3-4 days before I could start throwing again, and then by the next week's game, I would be generally okay. And I did that for a long time. I just never got it. I need surgery on it if I were actually going to be serious, but it's too late now. I'm just going to stop playing.
I got something for him, Dano. It's called not the bionic arm. What's that thing I got?
The kinetic arm.
Kinetic arm. Mm-hmm. The kinetic arm. It goes on your arm. It would probably help anything.
It takes all the stress off your
exactly.
Cuff, yeah.
It takes it and your elbow. It's great, man. I mean,
I'll give it a look, but I think my days are over.
Yeah, probably. Scott said that too. Oh, I was supposed to say that. Relationship. So relationship was big, right? And this is off subject just a little bit. My granddaughter's in law school to be an entertainment lawyer, and she will be looking for a what do you call that, intern job in the summertime, And you think that maybe I can have some inside pull with your help? You can relate us to
No pressure.
relate it to
You
somebody.
never know. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. We'll talk to her. I'll do everything I can to help her, of course.
Yeah,
but that's a
I
heck
asked
of a
you about
career.
that one time.
That's a heck of a career.
Yeah, and the only reason I'm bringing it up, she sent me a text. I was like, "What do you got, Steve?" on it?" So hey, look, I made my commitment, and it's obvious now.
Yeah, we'll make something happen.
Okay, buddy, you the best. Oh, geez, I got so many questions here. I don't even know if it's time to turn it over to my man Dan. And there was stone silence, and nobody saying anything because the guy. When you went to Orlando, your first job was what?
Yeah, so they hired me. Chuck Rowe was the CEO, and Chuck, he was a heck of a guy, man. He was kind of an old coach. He was an Olympic track coach, believe it or not. He recruited football players for Doug Dickey at Tennessee. Legendary guy. But he was a hard charging kind of promoter, and so we just kind of hit it off a little bit. I mean, he wouldn't make it probably today. He passed away a couple of years ago, unfortunately. But he was a tough guy, but he put me in charge of events. So my job was to come in there and do event management, and so I was just kind of one of the first assignments he gave me was to actually, believe it or not, I thought I was getting hired to run sports, and he gave me a parade to run. So I had the Citrus Bowl parade. And then a couple of he let me do some of the neutral site college football games we were doing those days, and so we did Duke and Florida State. In those days we would buy the home game of one of the smaller schools like Duke because they were playing Florida State. We'd relocate that to Orlando. So my job was to run that kind of match. We were doing our NFL preseason games at that point. So he gave me a fair amount that first season, and then the director of the department, a guy named Sam Stark, he took an opportunity in Chicago with one of our corporate partners.
And he was the director?
He was the director of the department, and this is 12 months in, and they made me the director of the department immediately. And so he just kind of, I don't know, I just loved what I was doing immediately, right? I didn't want to get out of bed when I was working in the cell phone business and the advertising business, but when I got this job, and I got paid half as much as I was making the year prior in the newspaper sales business. So I took a huge pay cut. But
to go to
Orlando. I just hated it. I drove an hour each way from Lakeland. I couldn't afford to rent anything up in Orlando, so I drove an hour each day because I was living with some buddies from UCF and Lakeland, about 5 of us in a big old house. And so I wanted to get away from what I was doing so bad that when I got there, I just loved it. I'd work. I didn't care how early I was there, how late at night. I was just there all the time, and I took on like a sport. I was going to show you. You give me this parade, I'm going to make it the most successful event you could have. We had doubled the national broadcast clearances for that parade in terms of the number of cities it was in. I think we were in about 30 million homes that first year I did it.
Really?
So
you doubled
what they had. Took over the corporate partnerships. It was profitable immediately at the end of that first year. I did well enough in the preseason games and the college games that Chuck started to include me in corporate partnership discussions and bringing me into some of the television deals and some of those early years with the SEC and the Big Ten, and then with the ABC deal that we did. A guy named Tony Petitti was in the room along with Lauren Matthews and all the other big power players over there at ABC Sports. And lo and behold, here we are, 20 some years later, and Tony Petitti's now the new commissioner of the Big Ten Conference. And so it's crazy how these careers go. But he's one of the most powerful. He and Greg Sankey, essentially, at the SEC and Tony at the Big Ten are power players to the biggest degree. But he involved.
But now let's get something straight. You're a power player in Orlando.
Yeah, well,
huh? You went from event manager to the big dog, and what was it?
It was in a year.
Top 50 best leaders in Orlando, and
it's been a long career. But they if you drive slow enough downtown, they just throw some of those things in your window. If your window's down, hey, you're the CEO of the year now. Oh, thank you. Or you're the 50 most. There were only 50 people. Is what they don't tell you. They only had 50 candidates, so you're one of the 50. But it was a good run, but I attacked it, man. I just loved it. I love what I did, and I tell kids this all the time: if you love what you're doing, it's not about money. You don't care what you're getting paid. You're going to be successful at it, and I was. You give me more, and I just wanted to show you that I had the ability. And in sports too, if you want to grow, you want to go up the ranks. If you're ambitious about wanting to run a company. And it's okay not to be, right? You just love sports and you just love what you're doing in sports, and you're a marketing person or accounting person. That's all cool too, right? I wanted to do more. I wanted to control the destiny of the organization. And to do that, usually you got to bounce around. You're going to different states, sometimes different countries, and you're moving up, and then you may find your way back, but in the end, you don't usually stay in the same spot, whether it's in the collegiate space and you want to be an athletic director or something, or a football coach. You're usually having to take a bunch of different opportunities. And then my career just ended up through whatever, through will, I guess, or good grace of God, all my opportunities came here.
You don't think it was part of the fact that when you got something, you did it, and you did it great, you did it. And look, I know you from a distance. Basically, for the last 20 years, I know you from the guy that barred me from a bowl game. You want to expand on that a little bit?
Well, I mean, I'm sure there were a lot of good reasons. I can't remember.
You don't remember that one?
But I think it was you probably joined as a member, and you were scouting football games for us.
What it was? No, I wasn't. I was a member of Citrus Bowl for a good many years. I just don't do that anymore. But man, that's a great. By the way, anybody wants to join the Citrus Bowl, let's get to that. But let's finish this story, guy. I want to get back to the Citrus Bowl. It's a great organization. Actually, you invited me with Scott on the field. I'd never been on a field in my life. That's what probably got me into the Citrus Bowl. They said, you come on the field, but you can't do this and that and do it. And Scott is he's like my daddy. You can't do this, you can't do that. Well, at the end, I think you present trophy to Spurrier on the middle of the field or something.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
So
probably Florida.
So you're giving the trophy away on national television, and I'm behind you going like this. And you call Scott up and say, you tell your dad he's barred. You don't remember that?
Hey, well, at least you got on TV. You got that memory to look back on.
And you don't even remember. That's good.
I do remember it kind of now that you remind me. It's, you wouldn't be, let's just say you're probably not the only person that we had to bar for that kind of.
Yeah, I know it was all tongue in cheek, but it was funny. Yeah. So let's get back to the Citrus Bowl. Tell me about the Citrus Bowl and the value that it brings to the Orlando, and the value it brings to anybody who wants to join this.
Yeah, so it's been great. Florida Super Sports is the name of the company, and when I started in '95, still today, it's a different. The college football postseason bowl games, Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl, Orange Bowl. There's a bunch of them, these days. But the legacy games, they're focused on their mission around that game. Usually it's philanthropic, but they're designed to bring people to your town and host a big opportunity to put your town on TV and drive ratings and exposure and all that stuff. Our game's no different, but our game has always endeavored to be, our organization has been more entrepreneurial. So kickoff games, neutral site games, NFL preseason games, and baseball tournaments. We used to run a huge tournament for 20 years over at by Disney and Osceola County in the Astros complex. So if there was an opportunity for us to get into another sector that would drive tourism, we did it. And that's our approach, and then some today, right? So Citrus Sports it was originally founded in 1947. That was the first game. Tangerine Bowl was the name, and played Catawba and Maryville. Was that very
Catawba?
First game, Catawba and Maryville. And then, it kind of grew, and it was a project of the Elks Lodge, like all these organizations. Originally, it was kind of like, the Elks in Orlando said, hey, we need to raise some money for a children's hospital. We should, these other bowl games around the country seem like they're doing good things. Let's start a bowl game. So the Elks Lodge, instead of doing like a golf tournament or something else, they said, well, college football. And they would scratch together checks at the end of the year to pay these teams. They would have to ante up money as members and make this thing go. But probably by 1972, the game had outgrown a service organization. So it became an entity. Florida Citrus Sport became Tangerine Sports Association. And then it just kind of grew and grew and grew. The teams got bigger. Bobby Bowden, you might remember, played his first bowl game there in 1972. We had a huge historically black college university, Morgan State, play, and they were undefeated for 3 straight seasons. Willie Lanier, Frenchie Fuqua, all these guys, and they played there. The game grew. In 92, it's the first kind of sponsor of a college bowl game was Florida Department of Citrus. People don't know this, but they thought that the Citrus Bowl was just kind of like the sugar or something else. It was agriculture in the state of Florida. We'll just call it the Citrus Bowl. But that was a sponsorship. So they wrote a check of citrus growers to change the name to the Florida Citrus Bowl. So that 92 on, we signed the ABC deal, SEC, the Big Ten, and kind of the rest is history. Then we added a second game, which is today the Pop-Tarts Bowl. And we picked first after the playoff in the SEC, the Big Ten, and the ACC. And we picked second in the Big 12. So you look at the 4 power conferences that are today, we're at the highest level of those 4 outside of the top 12 in the country for the playoff. So we're excited about that. The Florida Classic's the biggest HBCU rivalry in the country, does 55, 60,000 people a year in Orlando. It's huge. Now we're running everything, NFL Pro Bowls. We'll have 6 now after the one coming up this year.
6 Pro Bowls?
6 of the 8.
6
of the 8 that they have played in the U.S. stateside. It used to be in Hawaii for 30, 40 years. They've played now 8 in the U.S. Stateside, in the lower 48. We'll now have been 6 of them. So we're super proud of that. We've hosted a ton of NFL preseason games. We've upgraded the stadium massively. Our soccer business is huge. We got into that big in 2020. We've always kind of been in soccer. We were the local host of Olympic soccer with Atlanta in 1996. I've done a bunch of friendlies there, but we really expanded soccer when COVID hit. It was this is the long-winded way of saying our organization is aggressive, and we essentially try and use Camping World Stadium just like all the pro teams do, the Dolphins, the Bucks. Those are primary tenants of these stadiums, and they get to harvest the naming rights and the suites and the clubs and all those kind of assets. And I always thought we should be like them. We don't have an NFL set schedule of 8 or 9 games in the building or a college tenant, but we could be that. We could be that, whether it's Monster Jam, motorsports, WWE coming into the building, rock concerts, country concerts, college football, pro. All of those events, if you kind of threw a jersey over them all, call them whatever you want to call them, that's our season. And if you monetize that season that way, it would separate us maybe from these other bowl games, these other cities that had legacy kind of games. So I was like, we'll beat them because we'll be smarter than we'll have a different business model. And it's worked so far.
So that was your thought.
Yeah, we kind of moved to that, and so we got the rights. We got the rights to all those assets in the first upgrade in 2014. That was voted in 2027, where the city and the county agreed to spend $175 million. The first $175 million on what was the Citrus Bowl, now Camping World Stadium. We gutted the lower bowl and started anew. Right, we knew it was going to take probably 20 years to get enough money to do the whole place. I got that first amount approved right when I became CEO. Tom and I were working on that together when he was still the CEO and still alive. I was his number 2, and we essentially were going to that. He unfortunately, through a tragedy, passed away at the office. And so, I was there with him and other staff members. It was a horrible time. He was a great leader, great man. He passed away, and then they did a national search for about 8 months. But in the middle of that, I'm still doing everything you need to do to run the organization. They ultimately hired me about probably 3 or 4 months later. We got the vote to approve that first $175 million. It was critical to the future. You got to have a competitive stadium. So I wanted us to occupy that space. I wanted to be the tenant of the stadium.
A question on that. So are you, now that you're through the other side of this different business model, have other stadiums followed you?
Well, they're already there. It's just these other stadiums have the benefit of a huge franchise.
That's what I mean, though. Like, without being the Buccaneers or the Dolphins, you don't have a home team. So
that's right.
Right.
That's
so
right.
Are there other stadiums around that have kind of seen what you've done and
no, and not really, because they have tenants usually.
Yeah.
So probably Orlando and San Antonio, the only 2 cities, kind of major cities, that have a major stadium
Yeah.
that doesn't have a home tenant. You know, there's a college team playing in San Antonio now, UTSA, at their stadium, but at ours, nobody has been since UCF built on campus.
Right.
So me, it was an opportunity, not a loss or failure. Hey, it's over in Orlando. I tried to explain to our community that we're a neutral site community.
Right.
We should be the neutral site community. When you're going to be hosting events that are interesting, nationally relevant, LSU, Florida State, Pro Bowls, you name it, we should be doing that in Orlando. That'll be our home team.
Well, that was your selling point to get the $175 million. Was that correct? I mean, you needed some kind of selling point. You say, hey, we're going to operate just like the Tampa Bay operates because they got 8 games. We got 8 games a year too. But
more, yeah.
So listen, let me change this a little bit so we understand that. But I want you to talk a little bit about the Citrus Club, because there's people out there that could join the Citrus Club, and I found that to be, from my standpoint, I did things with my son, because I got to go to college games and get out on the field with my son and evaluate these teams, and they think I was a scout.
That's right. That's right.
Tell us about the Citrus Club.
Yeah, people can join, of course. It's like our season ticket base, so we have 2 bowl games, and their packages come with tickets to both bowl games. And in the rest of the season, they're active. They're out there engaged. We're doing all kinds of events. Feast on the 50 has 5,000 people at it. It's kind of a party on the field to celebrate college football. That's coming up soon. There's a number of events throughout the year to stay engaged, build business relationships. But many of them scout for us. So there'll be about 300 of our 1,000 members will sign up to go out on the road and go to the SEC, Big Ten, ACC, Big 12 home games and represent the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl or the Pop-Tarts Bowl. So they'll be there on our behalf and shaking hands. They'll be in the press box and down on the field and going to the press conference afterward. And it's a relationship business, and they're our relationship people out there during the season. But it's a blast for them, of course. You have some great games. You're seeing all these different, regardless of who you're a fan of, you're seeing the way that all these different schools do it. Mm-hmm. What's their atmosphere tailgate lot or their RV lot, or what's their process, what are the traditions? So it's just been a lot of fun, and the organization's active. We have about 1,000 of them, probably account for 15 or 18,000 total people in a building of 65,000, and they're our local season ticket base.
I can tell you that one of the experiences I'll take to my grave with my son is walking through Florida's pregame, going into the swamp, and then being in there when Steve Spurrier was in there. I mean, I couldn't buy the ticket to that for what I got my membership for. You get so many memories and things, being thought of as somebody important.
You got to fake it till you can make it. That's the thing.
And in a way, you are. But it's just like anything else, man.
No, it's a cool
but
thing.
It's a lot of fun.
It's a cool thing. A lot of great memories, for sure. I mean, there's some of these stories like you just said, and I was blessed to be like you. You're at so many of them, and I just remember games like that and the people, that you meet. But Iowa and LSU sticks out in my mind probably as Nick Saban, I think, was at LSU that season. Iowa, Kirk Ferentz, and game come down in the last minute to Iowa. This is everything, right? LSU's played big time, games their whole career, but here they are on national TV in the Citrus Bowl, and it's late in the game. There's like 15, 20 seconds left. Iowa's driving down 4 or 5 points and had 3 timeouts on the board. I just remember sitting on the sideline going, he's going to get fired. He didn't use any timeouts. 11 seconds left, and they're kind of on the 40-yard line. Lo and behold, they just run all goes. And the guy in the seam's wide open. They hit him for a bomb down the field to end the game with the clock going to zeros. And there's the biggest dog pile. Standing right next to this dog pile of humanity. It was the biggest game still. And I was.
Did you remember it?
I remember it like yesterday. It was the only touchdown in all 4 years of that kid's career was that touchdown.
Really?
Gosh,
in that game. Only in college football, can you see those kind of things. But it's pretty cool. And Nick Saban ended up playing or coaching kind of a roundabout way. I don't know that they wanted Nick to come to our game anymore because he was there at Michigan State with Michigan State. He did not coach that game. He decided to leave because he went to go to LSU. So Bobby Williams coached that game. It was against Florida. And they ended up beating them with a last-second field goal. Then Nick Saban came back with LSU, and they played in the game I just talked about in Iowa. He left to go coach the Dolphins after that.
That's right.
Yeah, he came with Alabama recently a couple times. So I'm sure that track record of losing Nick after you come to the Citrus Bowl probably wasn't one that anybody wanted to see. But
So
I do have a question
hold
before
on
I
a
get into.
second. Before you do that, I want to set something up before we move on. He's went from event planner. Now, are you? We've been talking about you being the CEO. You got to the CEO. What with the big move from the director, the CEO, is that the same or?
Yeah, no, I was an event planner, and then within a year, I became a director of the department. So the events, it was a small company. The 2 or 3 event people would report to me, and we would do the events for the season. And then I ultimately took over our corporate sponsorship sales, and then kind of became what they call a COO, a chief operating officer. It's kind of a number 2. And I was that for Chuck Rowe. And then Chuck retired, and they did a national search for his replacement, and I was one of the internal candidates for that. And I was a young guy, and I was, I don't know, 30, 31, 32.
Super young.
Something like that. I think 32. Pretty young, but they were considering me to replace him. And then they hired Tom Mickle, who was the associate commissioner of the Atlantic Coast Conference at that time. And he was at Duke a long time before that, but he got the job, and I ultimately became his chief operating officer, so it was his number 2. So when he passed away, they did another national search, and I got that one. I think I was 38. So I was the youngest in the country at that time. So I'm not the oldest thing.
And the best. So go ahead, get him, Dano.
Well, I do want to go. So the 12-team playoff, and you're the number 1 after the 12. Is there any chance to get in the top 12? Like, what are the mechanics of that?
Yeah, I hope so. We'll see. Right now what they're going to do is, people don't think of this a lot, but they had a 12-year agreement. The current playoff at 4 teams. It was a 12-year agreement. So all those agreements made it hard to change early. So what they ended up doing, since you needed 100% of the conference commissioners to vote to change the system. They needed that. You couldn't just decide it, the SEC and the Big Ten or a few others. They needed everybody 100% to change an existing contract. So they got to get everybody on board. They had to do some things in terms of access and, how many champions, how many at-large, how do you split the money, that were kind of a 2-year solution. So really what's happening is they expanded the playoff for 2 years here to ride out the last 2 years of this cycle. So and then the rest of the system had to adjust their agreements or agreements with everybody else to kind of make this work. So what's going to happen is, after 2 years, it'll be a little different probably. How they split the money. Some think that maybe expanding to 16 would be the thing. We'll see. I think if they do that, we're well positioned and want to be well positioned to compete there. If not, we want to compete for a national championship. And we just got $400 million more approved for Camping World Stadium. We had $60 million a couple of years ago, so we're darn near $800 million in my career that we've finally gotten this thing to a place where I think we could compete for a national championship. We're adding a 150,000 square foot indoor fieldhouse event center with it. So, that campus will be rocking. But I think there will be opportunities here in the next 2 years. If not, we're in a really good position, I think, if you can keep picking in those leagues at the highest level. Look at what the Big Ten just adding, Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA. Of course, Oklahoma and Texas just joined the SEC. When you look at the teams in those 2 leagues, there's a lot of good inventory. So I'm excited to see how this year and next year go, especially when you're not having to really host the championship game loser anymore. Because instead of having a West and an East, and maybe the West was really weak and you had a team that, the East just beat up on all those guys all season long, and then you're taking them off of a loss, now you're just going to have the 2 best teams playing in these leagues. We're going to have some pretty doggone good football teams that didn't have to make a trip 2 weeks earlier to spend their money and, take on maybe another loss. So there's a lot of good things about what's happening for Orlando, but we'll see. I hope they expand it, but I want to get after a national championship.
Would that be the crown jewel in your career?
It'd be huge. I don't know how you top it.
I don't know.
I don't think we'll host the Super Bowl ever, but this would be something. If we can bring a national championship to Orlando and Central Florida, that'd be top of the mountain.
My next, let's just take a step back on. I mean, you've accomplished so much. This is it's definitely phenomenal. But what would you say are your top 3 greatest achievements so far?
I just say, we have hiring a good team. Our staff's the best in the world. I'd be a failure if it wasn't for the people we have in our building. We have really, they deserve all the credit. I get it, most of it, but you just don't deserve it, right? So our staff, and then the work in the neighborhood, not anything to do with sports.
Yeah.
But I would say that our work in Lift Orlando, founding Lift Orlando, and using the stadium as a catalyst to invest in the poorest zip code in Central Florida, to bring those kind of.
Is that what West Lakes is? The poorest zip code?
Well, call it. I shouldn't use the word poor. Underserved, underinvested. It's lack of investments, and so getting to kind of come in there and start to make some drastic changes. The whole idea was, the ambition was, what if a stadium? A lot of times you hear this. Hey, we're going to build this new arena. Going to build a new stadium. Let's put it in this area. Usually the real estate's cheaper or whatever, and they build these facilities all over the country, and they hope that the money's going to trickle out of the building and everybody's going to get a little bit richer because they live next door to this arena or stadium. And that we all know that's not how it works. It doesn't happen. But we thought, what if it could? Wouldn't that be kind of a cool story if our stadium, the better it did, the more events it did, the more money it made, it flowed literally into these neighborhoods. And so I didn't know how to do that. We had some smart guys on our board. We got together, we flew around the country, looked at some other models. We did 1,400 surveys in the home. So went into everybody's living room, had an organization do this, and within think of the stadium in the center of the pond, if you will,
sure.
All the homes that were in the area, you went in there, sat down and said, hey, you had a magic wand, you were going to wave it, what would you do to change your neighborhood? And so you did this 1,400 homes wide, and then looked at all that information, and kind of some themes pop up. There were kind of 4 things that most people said were important. It was a safe, affordable place to live. It was the best education money could buy, of course. You needed access to a better job. You need to make a little bit more money, take care of your family. And 3, health and wellness. A place to go outside, be active, play sports, see a proper doctor. So when you start studying that, you went and talked to the elementary school next door, and you ask the principal, well, how many kids, how many kids are here from one year to the next? So 3rd graders to 4th grade, how many? How many are, do you lose each year? She goes, well, 100%. I said, 100%? What do you mean? You're like, no, how many kids actually go to 4th grade here that just finished 3rd grade? She goes, we lose 100%. They go somewhere else. And so what happens is, what you found out is you can spend all the money you want on schools and education because it is important. But it doesn't matter if they're not there to actually benefit from it, right? The kids are, what happens in these communities under stress is the parents are so portable. They're living with aunts and uncles the next summer or year, or they're under stress and they're going to live in a nightly motel or moving to a different part of town. And so it was just the stress of it was you realized that you needed to do all of it. So you needed to do all those 4 things. So we set out to do all those 4 things. So the very first thing we did is they had a boarded up, fenced up affordable housing development that HUD had that an absentee landlord had run into the ground. So they moved all the residents out, boarded it up. So we went ahead and bought that and built a beautiful new, 200 unit mixed income housing development. So that was the first thing we did. Second thing was 120 more units for seniors right next to it, managed by the same group. But we built it for the market rate. The people said, well, nobody's going to, 80% of it is for affordable, 20% of it is market rate, downtown rate renters. So you build it for that. You have granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, swimming pools, business center. It's a beautiful complex. And people said, well, nobody's going to pay top dollar rent for downtown and live in an affordable community. Said they absolutely will. And if you don't believe it, you come see. It's a values-based system, not a monetary system. There's a lot of really rich people I don't want to live next door to, but there's a lot of people with no money that are great families,
Sure.
you got strong backbone, right kind of mentality and values you live with all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it is. It's a values-based community. So the 20 market rate units sold out like in a week.
That's crazy.
$200 per month over rent. So but the sad thing is there were 10,000 applicants for 200 units. So it just shows you the lack of inventory for affordability in our community. So anyway, we built that, had the senior development. Then we had to get to work on some things that allowed kids to be safe after school. So about a $10 million Boys and Girls Club, state of the art. It's got coding in there for computers and music and sports. Built a 30,000 square foot health and wellness building. So now, some of these families are taking 3-4 bus exchanges to go see a proper doctor.
Yeah.
Now you think about this, you're building an ecosystem, and then we added the early learning center for 150 kids pre-K, managed by Primrose. So a kid could literally grow up, never have to leave the neighborhood. You go to all these assets all the way through high school, go on to college. You got a beautiful new Lake Lorna Dune Park on the north end of the stadium. It's got putting courses in it and football fields and everything else. And so you started listening to the neighborhood. You got these physical assets, hopefully, that start to allow families to be stable, and kind of the whole concept is that you teach a man to fish, right, and eat forever. And so nobody wants a handout. Nobody in the neighborhood is interested in handouts. Don't want to be called poor. Will work hard, do things on their own. You just need to create some assets so the deck wasn't always stacked against them. Kids in these neighborhoods shouldn't have to. It's kind of like going up an escalator in the wrong direction your whole career through school and saying, hey, let's celebrate this kid that got out. Oh, look at a kid that it's possible. They got out. Well, we're looking at 2 or 3% of the kids. Right? If they were in our neighborhood or some other neighborhood and with the same teachers, the same opportunity to be safe, you weren't having to change schools every year, you'd see a heck of a lot more kids achieving success too, right? So that was the idea here, is let's go ahead and let kids, without regard to money, at least compete, have the same chance to graduate, go to college, and get a job, and that's what's happening there. So we're 10 years in, $120 million later, I think the next.
Who's giving that $120 million?
Well, it's everybody. It's a business model. So this is the business approach to these things, to charity. You come in and say, when we developed Pendana Phase 1, that 200 units, we went to the best affordable housing developer in our community. Said, instead of giving us a check, why don't you come here and show us how to do this? The best banker, the best affordable tax credit person. So you come in and
teach you how to fish.
Yeah, and so for $5 or $6 million of cash, you acquire the property. You work with the city on some abatement and different things like that for another $1 million or so, and you cobble this stuff together. But the tax credit deal that you do, because in these development deals for 6 or 9% tax credits, that's where you're getting the large tranche of cash, and then you're operating that building. It's a 20-year plan. So you're building a $40-50 million property for $5, $6, $7 million. So it just worked out, right? But you bring in the money comes from everywhere: loans, cash, philanthropy, rents, so forth and so on. So it's a business approach to solving these complex problems in communities under stress. It's pretty cool.
So now, have you done any follow-ups to see how many third graders make it to grade 4 in this community?
Yeah, they're studying it every year. There's metrics and data. You can pull up Lift Orlando's site and pull down the latest, kind of updates on where we are in terms of crime and household income. That neighborhood, that region has outperformed the Orange County increases in household income by like 15%.
Talk about making a difference.
15 times. Something like that. It's when we started doing work, there's a sad fact now. You probably could have bought a house for $60 or $70,000, and now they're $260,000 or $270,000
in that area.
Yeah, it's just that people see the change coming, and so now you're wanting to figure out ways that you can help the families benefit from this, benefit from the equity in the home that they're now finding, not get kind of taxed out of living in all this work. So that'll be the work ahead.
Yeah, well, that's cool.
We're coming to the end. It's been a fascinating discussion that we could go on for a long time, but I got to be somewhere. You got to be somewhere. Let's. Okay. What is next for Steve Hogan? You've probably said it, but define what is in your focus for the next 5 years.
Yeah, so we're building capacity right now, right? I mean, we're aggressive. We've been successful, so we're taking risk, investing. We bought a soccer tournament, as I said back in COVID. It's killing it. We've to imagine we had no major international club soccer in Orlando, relatively speaking. But to look back now, we've hosted Mount Rushmore, essentially. Real Madrid last year against Juventus, the number one club in the world in terms of economics, the most valuable, the most followed. Barcelona this year against Manchester City, the most successful club in the world right now, Erling Haaland. Chelsea, Arsenal, you name it, we've been bringing them in with sold-out stadiums, since 2021. Sold out, Camping World Stadium, hard now, 4 straight years in a row. And that was us going to buy a tournament, move it into our company, and start to run it on a global basis. We were a part of running 6 matches in the U.S. this year. So we ran a match in Yankee Stadium this season with AC Milan and Man City. We ran one in Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina. We ran one at Columbus at Ohio State University with Manchester City, Chelsea. I can go on and on and on and name all these stadiums, but here we are doing $15 million worth of business in the summer so that we can have one big one right here in Orlando. It's an example of, I say all that to say, this is us adding capacity to our company and our impact to this town. If you want these kind of big things, you got to go play at that level. So the barrier to Orlando having these big matches was somebody had to be owning the inventory around the country. So I said, okay, well then FCS has to go own that inventory around the country, and we're going to go compete with all these private equity firms and big players. So what the future is now is complete Camping World Stadium's campus. Got $400 million coming. We're going to do that over the next 2.5 seasons. We got to build that with excellence. We got to improve everything around that. Private real estate, different things that we've been acquiring. We got to add kind of food and beverage options. You got to come out of this new investment with the next iteration of West Lakes. It's got to be a destination. People, when they're done with the game, got to have a place to go. Or before the game, we got to add that experience, change the way that you park, change the way that you arrive in the park. That's a big job. That's going to happen over the next 2.5 seasons. We got to be ready by the 2027 football season. With that, I want to come out of the gate in 2027 and host the Florida-Georgia game in Orlando. That would be a huge achievement for us. We put a lot of money in front of them, and we're going to be aggressive. We want to host potentially the NFL football Jaguars coming in there to play their whole season in Orlando. That's an opportunity in front of us. I think, whether it's them or anybody else, I believe we'll host NFL regular season football game in my career in Camping World. That's my ambition, but I think it could happen as early as 27. And then we got to go from there to the next iteration, right? We got to build out a complex and capabilities to do the youth space. Pop Warner Super Bowl Cheer National Championship is a big business for us in December. We acquired that a few years ago. We have about 30,000 hotel room nights filled with that 1 week in the first week of December. It's a $15 million business. There's a lot of those kind of opportunities in the future. To do that, we got to build out some physical campus capabilities in town, not necessarily at Camping World, but in town. We're going to need some more assets to host these clubs. We just put Brazil in town for 21 days to train to play Team USA in our stadium. We got to have a proper facility to do that and the youth activity. So all of those kind of things need to kind of get figured out. We got to finance them, start building them here in the next couple of years. And I think we should be a campus hosting over 1 million people a year, $600 million plus in economic impact, and probably 2 trillion impressions all over the world. Impressions, exposure, reach of our stadium. We should be generating on the order of 2 trillion impressions. So that's where we'll be.
Well, before I ask my last question, I'm going to make an editorial statement that I'm sitting here listening to you, and the first time I've had, a very, an hour conversation with you. I just knew you as one of Scott's best friends. I've listened to you in a lot of scenarios in the public world, talking, that kind of thing. But I'm going to tell you, if I was into politics in Orlando, I'd be grooming your ass for mayor.
Don't put that on me.
Dude, you would be a great mayor. I know you would love it. It wouldn't be a job you love. But dude, You could lead that. You could lead. I mean, you're a very impressive guy. That's all I got to say. But with that, I'm gonna put you on the spot because young people out there, the way this guy went from just a regular college kid and went from he took all the steps that he went into the bottom and raised to the top. That's the American dream, my friend. So in an American dream, what would be your 3 key things, and think about this for a minute, to share with our audience?
I would tell a young kid today, figure out inside, kind of your heart, what is it you love doing, right? What do you just want to wake up and do it every day? It's not about money, you should be motivated by that, but what do you just love doing? And figure that out. Some people just love drawing or being graphic artists, and they just would do it all day, all night long. Maybe you just love building video games and coding out video games, and you're just fascinated by that. Figure that out, because whatever it is you love doing every day, you're going to be successful at and great at. So just use that as your kind of center point. I think building real, authentic relationships is going to be critical. So who not so much from in a cynical way, like, oh, I know this person, they got a lot of money. Yeah. It's not that. You'd be shocked at how many of your friends adjacent to you in college or over your career, somebody you might have met that, in my business was an event manager at a really low level that I used to work with 25 years ago. Now is running a company somewhere. They're running a league or a college or an athletic director. And now all of a sudden we're in a position to help each other do business together. But for a good, positive, healthy relationship 20 years earlier, that wouldn't have been possible. So I think you got to build your relationships, because I could write a book on how many stories I would have of opportunities we've landed in Orlando in our stadium that was purely because of the relationship I had, not because of Orlando or money or something else. If it wasn't for that relationship, we wouldn't have gotten it. And so I think it's just critically important, that you build you build that relationship. And I think you just got to be a transparent, honest broker. You just have to be a person who, let go of all, kind of the rest of the nonsense that doesn't matter, and just shoot people straight. I think if you do that, you're willing to do that, you're willing to, open yourself up a little bit, you'd find that it would benefit not only you personally, but, the work that you're doing. So those would be 3 things I would tell people to do is go do what you love, essentially. Treat people right and hold on to those relationships.
I'm telling you, Steve, all honesty, you recapped that so well. I'm saying, wow, man. I mean, you're a great speaker, great talker, and you hit those 3 key points, and I'm going to put that as a piece out there. What do you say, Dano? Wasn't he great?
Well, Steve, thank you so much for joining us on the show. You're an absolute rock star, man.
Thanks for having me in the dugout, boys. I get to hang out with real athletes. It's been fun.
We got him faked out.
I'm going to start buying the bench center dugout podcast.
Hope you enjoyed that interview with Steve Hogan. Hey, don't forget to subscribe. We need to get up to 2,000 subscribers. Give us a hand, subscribe. It's free.